I've always prided myself on staying calm under pressure. As an architect, chaos on a construction site isn't unusual, but nothing could have prepared me for the chaos Amanda unleashed that day. I was in the middle of a client meeting, my phone buzzing on the table like a persistent fly. Ignoring it, I focused on the presentation, explaining the nuances of a design I'd spent weeks perfecting. When the meeting ended, I picked up my phone and nearly dropped it. There it was, in bold and unapologetic detail, Amanda's Instagram post. The picture was of her, wearing a bikini I didn't recognize, posing on a beach I'd never seen. The caption read, "Starting fresh. I'm done with you, Michael. Moving to Florida with my 18-year-old lover. By the way, I sold your apartment, your car, and emptied the savings account. Oops." I read it again, thinking it had to be a joke or some strange social media prank. But the comments confirmed the worst. Her friends cheered her on, congratulating her for breaking free. Strangers chimed in with their unsolicited opinions, some calling her brave, others questioning her morals. My favorite was one guy who simply commented, "This will end well." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. My apartment? My car? Our savings? How had I missed all of this? Amanda and I had been drifting apart for a while, sure. Her late nights out, her sudden obsession with posting every aspect of her life online, the unexplained charges on our credit card, all red flags. But divorce through Instagram? That was a new low. I didn't react immediately. I couldn't. Instead, I went about my day as if nothing had happened, even though my stomach churned like a concrete mixer. My colleagues didn't notice anything was off, probably because I've mastered the art of compartmentalizing. But inside, I was replaying every argument, every suspicious moment, trying to piece together how we got here. Amanda's audacity wasn't entirely shocking. She had a flair for drama. What shocked me was the complete disregard for our shared history. 10 years of marriage reduced to a social media post and a smug oops. And the 18-year-old lover? That stung. Not because of jealousy, but because it was such a cliché. I half expected her next post to feature a convertible and a motivational quote about living her best life. By the time I got home, the post had gone viral. My phone was flooded with messages, some from friends, some from family, and a few from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone wanted to know if it was true. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat in the living room, staring at the empty wine glass Amanda had left on the coffee table. I should have felt anger or betrayal, but all I felt was relief. It hit me then. This wasn't the end of my life. It was the end of a chapter I'd outgrown. Amanda thought she'd won, thought she'd humiliated me, but she didn't know me as well as she thought. I wasn't the type to crumble under pressure. If anything, I thrived in it. I opened Instagram, read her post one more time, and typed a reply, "All the best." Simple, calm, and far more effective than any long-winded response. Amanda wanted drama. I wouldn't give it to her. But as I hit post, a small smile crept across my face. She had no idea what was coming. Amanda thought she'd outsmarted me. She believed she held all the cards. What she didn't realize was that I'd been quietly preparing for this moment for months. And by the time she figured it out, it would already be too late. You might wonder how I stayed calm. A bombshell like that should have sent me spiraling, right? But here's the thing. Amanda had underestimated me. She thought I'd crumble, lash out, maybe even beg her to come back. Instead, I sat back and let the pieces fall where they may because I knew something she didn't. I'd already started laying the groundwork for my own escape long before her Instagram theatrics. Let me explain. Amanda's behavior over the past year had become, let's just say, erratic. The late nights out with friends I'd never met, the sudden obsession with luxury brands, and the constant need for validation on social media. It all screamed of someone trying to fill a void. At first, I chalked it up to a midlife crisis. I tried to be supportive, even indulging her whims. But the cracks in our marriage were growing deeper, and I couldn't ignore them any longer. The tipping point came 6 months ago. I found a receipt in her bag, $3,000 spent on a handbag. When I asked her about it, she laughed it off, saying, "It's just money, Michael. Don't be so uptight." That's when I started paying attention. I began tracking our finances, reviewing transactions, and keeping a close eye on our shared accounts. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. The Instagram post confirmed what I'd suspected for months. Amanda wasn't just spending recklessly, she was planning her exit. Selling the apartment? The car? Emptying our savings? She must have thought I was blind, or maybe just too trusting to notice. But trust without accountability is a recipe for disaster. I'd quietly taken steps to protect myself, moving assets into my name and setting up a separate account she couldn't touch. She might have thought she'd wiped out our savings, but all she'd done was drain a decoy account. I'll admit, there was a part of me that wanted to confront her, to throw her betrayal back in her face. But what would that accomplish? Amanda thrived on drama. It was her fuel. Engaging with her would only give her the attention she craved. Instead, I chose silence. Silence is powerful. It makes people question their own actions, forces them to fill the void with their own insecurities. That night, as I sat on the couch scrolling through the flood of messages on my phone, I felt an odd sense of clarity. Amanda had given me the gift of freedom, even if she didn't realize it. Her post was meant to humiliate me, but all it did was solidify my resolve. I didn't need to fight her. I just needed to stay one step ahead. I poured myself a drink, a good single malt I'd been saving for a special occasion. This felt fitting. Amanda thought she'd won the game, but the truth was, she hadn't even been playing on the same board. I leaned back in my chair, savoring the smoky warmth of the whiskey, and allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. The wheels were already in motion. She wanted to start over? Fine, but not at my expense. My plans were set, and the beauty of it was, she wouldn't even see it coming. By the time she realized what I'd done, the damage would be irreversible. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud or dramatic. It's quiet, calculated, and delivered with precision. And so, as I typed out that calm, measured response, all the best, I wasn't just saying goodbye to Amanda. I was saying goodbye to the man she thought she could manipulate. The man who would have bent over backward to make her happy, even at his own expense. That man was gone, and in his place stood someone she should have never underestimated. The next morning, I woke up to a text from one of Amanda's friends. OMG, you're handling this so well. Amanda told us about the apartment. So brave of you to just let her sell it like that. Brave? That word almost made me laugh out loud. She had no idea, and neither did Amanda. The apartment Amanda thought she sold wasn't really hers to sell. Sure, we lived there together, and legally, her name was on the papers, but only partially. Years ago, when we bought it, I structured the ownership in a way that protected my investment. Call it foresight, call it paranoia. I call it smart planning. The deed was technically under a trust I'd set up, a fact Amanda never cared to ask about. She'd always been too busy posting pictures of the apartment's interior for her followers to notice the finer details. As soon as Amanda announced the sale, I checked with the property management company. They confirmed what I already suspected. She'd found a buyer, some unsuspecting couple, and rushed through the deal like a thief in the night. She probably thought she was clever, handling everything while I was busy with work. But her oversight was glaring. She never bothered to confirm if the trust allowed her to sell without my consent. It didn't. I'll admit, there was a part of me that wanted to let her proceed with the charade, just to see how it would play out. But the responsible side of me knew I couldn't let innocent people get caught in the mess she was creating. So, I made a few calls. The buyer, a young couple who seemed genuinely excited about their dream home, was understandably furious when I explained the situation. They had already handed over a deposit, and Amanda had pocketed it. I could have let her deal with the fallout on her own, but I didn't want to leave loose ends. I contacted my lawyer and had him draft a formal notice to the buyers, explaining the situation and promising to assist them in getting their money back. That part was easy. The harder part was knowing that Amanda was about to face the consequences of her arrogance in the most humiliating way possible. It didn't take long for the news to reach her. I got a frantic call that afternoon, Amanda's number flashing on my phone. I ignored it. Then came the texts. Michael, call me. It's important. Did you cancel the apartment sale? Michael, what did you do? I didn't respond. Let her stew in her own panic. She had paraded her new life in front of the world, gleefully announcing her departure, her lover, her triumph. Now, reality was catching up to her, and I wasn't about to make it easy. By the time the real estate agent got involved, Amanda's carefully constructed narrative was crumbling. The agent called me, apologizing profusely for not verifying the details before proceeding. I assured them it wasn't their fault. Amanda had been deceptive. As for Amanda, well, she was learning the hard way that ignorance and arrogance are a dangerous combination. I can only imagine the scene when the agent informed her that the sale was void, that the deposit she'd so eagerly pocketed now had to be returned, that the apartment was still legally tied up in a trust she couldn't touch without my approval. I like to think she was sitting there, stunned, realizing for the first time that she wasn't as clever as she thought. That evening, I poured myself another glass of whiskey and sat by the window, watching the city lights. Amanda had tried to outmaneuver me, but she didn't understand that I'd built this life on a foundation of careful planning. She thought the apartment was her ace in the hole, but it was a house of cards, and I just pulled the bottom one out. The silence from her end was deafening. No calls, no texts, no snarky Instagram posts. She was probably scrambling to figure out her next move, but it didn't matter. The first domino had fallen, and there was no stopping what came next. Amanda's silence didn't last long. By mid-morning the next day, my phone buzzed with another round of frantic messages. I didn't need to read them to know she was panicking. After all, the apartment debacle wasn't the only trick I had up my sleeve. Amanda's next revelation was going to hit even harder, this time, involving the car she thought she'd sold. The car in question was a sleek black sedan Amanda loved to flaunt, especially when she was trying to impress her Instagram followers. It was her prized possession, or so she thought. What Amanda didn't realize or care to remember was that the car wasn't technically ours. It belonged to my company. You see, when I leased the car, I'd done so under my business account. It was a perk of being an architect running my own firm. The car payments were bundled into the company's operating expenses, which meant Amanda never saw the paperwork. All she knew was that it was in our garage, shiny and ready for her to parade around town. When she decided to sell it, she must have assumed it was a simple transaction. She couldn't have been more wrong. By the time I found out she'd sold the car, it was already gone. Amanda had handed over the keys to some private buyer and pocketed the cash. I had to admit, her audacity was impressive. Who sells a car without even checking the title? Amanda, apparently. I called the leasing company to inform them of the situation. They were less than amused. Legally, the car wasn't hers to sell, and the buyer would have to return it, or face serious legal consequences. When I mentioned Amanda's role in the mess, they assured me they'd be following up with her directly. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. That afternoon, Amanda's frantic texts turned into angry ones. You sabotaged the car sale too? They're saying I didn't have the right to sell it. What's going on? Michael, call me. I didn't. Instead, I let her stew while the leasing company handled the matter. By evening, she was blowing up my phone, switching between rage and desperation. You have to fix this, one message read. I already spent the money. I could almost hear the panic in her voice through the text. Her lover must have been wondering what was going on, watching her unravel. I imagined her sitting in a cheap Florida motel, furiously typing on her phone while trying to maintain her facade of control. The thought brought me more satisfaction than I'd care to admit. The next morning, I received an email from the leasing company confirming the car had been recovered. Apparently, the buyer hadn't been thrilled about returning it, but they complied once they realized the legal trouble Amanda's deception had caused. As for Amanda, well, she now owed the leasing company for damages and late fees, on top of having to deal with the buyer demanding their money back. She had dug herself into a hole, and the dirt was piling up fast. Amanda's pattern was clear. She acted first, thought later, and assumed the world would bend to her will. But the world doesn't work that way, and neither did I. That evening, I sat in my now quiet apartment, scrolling through her Instagram page. The once daily posts of luxury and confidence were gone, replaced by silence. Her followers were probably wondering where their queen had disappeared to. I wondered if Amanda had even begun to grasp the depth of her mistake. Probably not, but she would. This was just the beginning. I leaned back in my chair, sipping my coffee, and smiled. The car she'd stolen? Back where it belonged. The money she'd taken? Gone. Along with her illusions of control. Amanda had tried to take everything from me, but all she'd managed to do was destroy her own house of cards. And I wasn't done yet. Far from it. When Amanda drained our joint savings account, she must have felt like a mastermind. I can picture her, sitting in front of her laptop with a smug smile, clicking the transfer button and watching the balance hit zero. In her mind, this was her grand heist. Her final mic drop before waltzing off to Florida with her boy toy. What she didn't know was that she'd just played herself. Months before, I'd noticed Amanda's spending spiraling out of control. Designer clothes, expensive dinners, spa trips, the works. She always had a justification, of course. I deserve this, she'd say, or, it's a treat for us. The us part was a lie. I knew that. Everything she bought was for her Instagram audience, not for our marriage. So, I made a decision. I set up a decoy account. The plan was simple. I left the joint account untouched, but gradually transferred most of the money into a private savings account under my name. It wasn't sneaky. It was survival. I'd worked hard for that money, and I wasn't about to let her burn through it like confetti at a party. By the time she made her move, the joint account held a grand total of $632.43. That's what she drained, not the 5 figures she thought she was taking. I didn't react immediately when I saw the transaction alert. I let her have her moment, imagining her triumphantly announcing to her lover, "We're set. I've got all his money." The mental image was almost amusing. I pictured her booking first-class tickets to Florida, treating herself to designer luggage, and planning how she'd redecorate her new life. Meanwhile, the real money sat safely in an account she couldn't touch. The best part? I'd kept meticulous records of every transfer. If she tried to claim I'd hidden the money, I could easily prove that I'd simply moved it to protect our assets from her reckless behavior. Legally, there wasn't a thing she could do about it. Amanda's realization must have hit like a freight train. The first sign came when I received a text from her. "Where's the rest of the money?" I ignored it. Then another. "Michael, I know there was more in that account. What did you do?" I still didn't reply. By the third text, her frustration was palpable. "Don't play games with me. I need that money." That one made me laugh. She needed the money? What about me? The person who earned it? The person she betrayed? The irony was delicious. Amanda had built her escape plan on the assumption that I was oblivious. She didn't realize I'd been steps ahead of her the entire time. A few days later, I got a call from one of her friends. "Michael, Amanda's freaking out. She says you drained the account before she could. Is that true?" I kept my answer simple. She took exactly what was there. If she didn't like the amount, maybe she should have asked me about it first. Word must have gotten back to her because the messages stopped after that. I imagined her sitting in some dingy motel room, clutching her phone, realizing that her oops moment had turned into a nightmare. She thought she cleaned me out, but instead, she'd walked away with pocket change. The beauty of it all was how perfectly her greed had set the trap. If she hadn't tried to steal everything, she might have gotten away with more. But Amanda didn't do things halfway. She went for the jugular, and in doing so, she exposed herself completely. That night, I treated myself to a quiet dinner at home. No fancy restaurants or lavish spending, just a simple meal and a sense of satisfaction. The joint account was empty, yes, but my real savings were intact. More than intact, actually. I'd been smart enough to invest some of it, ensuring my financial stability long after Amanda was out of the picture. As I sat there, I couldn't help but marvel at the irony. Amanda had spent years chasing status, trying to impress strangers online with her fake life. But when it came down to it, all her scheming had left her with nothing but her own hubris. I took another sip of wine and smiled to myself. She wanted to play games, but I'd been playing chess while she was stuck on checkers. And this was just the beginning of her downfall. By the time Amanda realized she'd been outmaneuvered, the panic had started to set in. I could tell from the silence. For someone who lived for drama and attention, Amanda had suddenly gone quiet. No more Instagram posts flaunting her new life. No more smug texts trying to rub salt in the wound. She was retreating, likely scrambling to figure out her next move. That was fine by me. I wasn't scrambling. I was striking. I've always believed that the best way to handle betrayal isn't with rage, but with precision. Amanda's actions weren't just an emotional betrayal. They were financial, legal, and deeply personal. That's why I didn't just sit back and watch her implode. I made sure the implosion was thorough and undeniable. The first thing I did was file for divorce. Not just any divorce, a carefully crafted case built on the mountain of evidence I'd been collecting for months. Photos of her with her teenage lover, screenshots of her reckless spending, and proof of her fraudulent attempts to sell the apartment and car. All neatly organized and handed over to my lawyer. If Amanda thought she was walking away from our marriage unscathed, she was in for a rude awakening. My lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Clara, called me after reviewing the documents. "Michael, this is one of the most open and shut cases I've seen. If she even tries to fight this, she'll bury herself deeper." That was music to my ears. I wasn't looking for a fight. I was looking for closure. But if Amanda wanted to challenge me, I was ready. Next, I made sure to freeze any remaining assets she might try to claim. The joint account may have been emptied, but I wasn't about to let her weasel her way into anything else. The trust that held the apartment was ironclad, and the leasing company had already reclaimed the car. What little leverage Amanda thought she had was slipping through her fingers, and there was nothing she could do about it. Then came the lawsuits. The buyer Amanda had duped with the fake apartment sale wasn't content with just getting their deposit back. They wanted damages. I worked with my lawyer to ensure Amanda was held accountable. Between the real estate fiasco and the car debacle, she was looking at thousands in legal fees and restitution. It was poetic justice, really. Every lie she told, every corner she cut, was coming back to haunt her. But the piece de resistance was the public fallout. Amanda had spent years building a curated image online, presenting herself as a glamorous, successful woman. That image shattered the moment I started sharing the truth. I didn't go on a vindictive smear campaign. No, that wasn't my style. Instead, I let the facts speak for themselves. A few well-timed emails to mutual friends, coupled with the legal drama that couldn't stay hidden, and suddenly Amanda's supporters were nowhere to be found. Her friends who cheered her on during her Instagram announcement now distanced themselves, either out of embarrassment or sheer disbelief. The betrayal wasn't just against me. It was against everyone who had bought into her facade. The best part? I didn't have to lift a finger to make it happen. People love a good scandal, and Amanda's unraveling was a spectacle they couldn't ignore. I sat back and watched as the life she tried to build on lies and deceit crumbled around her. Her lover, the 18-year-old boy she'd thrown everything away for, must have realized she wasn't the glamorous woman she pretended to be. I imagined him packing his bags and leaving her behind, realizing he'd hitched himself to a sinking ship. That evening, as I reviewed the day's progress with my lawyer, Clara raised a glass of wine. "To karma," she said with a smirk. I raised mine in return. Amanda might have thought she was the architect of her own freedom, but all she'd built was a prison of her own making. And me? I was finally free of her chaos. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. Amanda's betrayal had cut deep, but her downfall wasn't just satisfying. It was necessary. By the time the dust settled, she'd have nothing left but the consequences of her actions. And me? I had my peace, my dignity, and a fresh start. That was all I needed. The silence didn't last forever. Amanda, in typical Amanda fashion, couldn't stay quiet for too long. A few days after my counterstrike was set into motion, I got a text from an unknown number. Her new lover's number, no doubt. The message was short and dripping with bravado. "You think you've won, but Amanda and I are better off without you. Enjoy your miserable life." I laughed. I wasn't miserable, I was thriving. But the text wasn't surprising. Amanda had a way of spinning every situation to fit her narrative, no matter how delusional it sounded. Her Florida dream, her fresh start, and her picture-perfect new life were nothing more than a facade, and I knew it was just a matter of time before the cracks became visible to everyone, especially her boy toy. It didn't take long for those cracks to widen. The first major blow to Amanda's plans came when her 18-year-old lover realized that the lifestyle she promised wasn't quite as luxurious as she'd led him to believe. Without access to the apartment, the car, or the savings, they were left scrambling. Florida's sunny beaches weren't so glamorous when you're stuck in a cheap motel room with nothing but a dwindling stash of ill-gotten cash. I imagine their first fight went something like this. Amanda trying to explain why they were suddenly broke, why the apartment she'd sold was no longer an option, and why the car was repossessed. Her lover, probably feeling duped, must have started questioning everything. "I thought you said you had money," he'd demand. "I thought we'd have a house." The reality of their situation began to sink in when Amanda's legal troubles caught up with her. Between the lawsuits from the fake apartment sale and the leasing company's demands over the car, her debts were piling up fast. Her lover, who had likely been drawn to her by the allure of financial security and a glamorous lifestyle, started to see her for who she really was, a manipulative, self-centered liar. I didn't need to hear the details to know how it ended. Young love, especially when built on lies, rarely survives the weight of reality. By the end of the week, Amanda's lover was gone. Whether he left with a dramatic exit or simply disappeared without a word, I couldn't say. All I knew was that her Instagram account, once filled with photos of them posing on the beach, went dark. No updates, no stories, no inspirational captions about starting over. Just silence. The irony wasn't lost on me. Amanda had thrown away everything. Our marriage, our home, our life together. For what? An illusion of freedom? A fleeting romance with a boy who couldn't even legally buy a drink? The woman who once prided herself on being untouchable was now stranded, humiliated, and completely alone. The best part was, I didn't have to lift a finger to make it happen. Amanda had orchestrated her own downfall with her greed and arrogance. She'd made her bed, and now she was lying in it, albeit without the designer sheets she'd always insisted on. I'll admit, there was a small part of me that felt pity for her. Not enough to undo anything, of course, but enough to acknowledge the tragedy of it all. Amanda had always been her own worst enemy, even if she refused to see it. Her Florida dream, much like her Instagram persona, had been nothing more than a carefully constructed lie. And now, that lie was unraveling faster than she could keep up. As for me, I was thriving. The apartment was mine. The car was back where it belonged, and my finances were secure. I'd even started reconnecting with friends and family, people I hadn't been able to fully enjoy because of Amanda's constant chaos. Life was simpler, quieter, and infinitely more peaceful. Amanda had gambled everything on a dream that was doomed from the start. And when it all came crashing down, there was no one left to blame but herself. Meanwhile, I was free, finally free, and I wasn't looking back. Amanda was always addicted to attention, but this time, the attention wasn't flattering. It started subtly, a few murmurs in the comments of her now-abandoned Instagram account. "Where are you, Queen?" one follower asked. Another, more direct, wrote, "Didn't you just announce you were moving to Florida? What happened?" Social media has a way of exposing the truth faster than anyone can hide it. The people who once cheered Amanda on as she paraded her betrayal were now demanding answers. Her silence spoke volumes, and it didn't take long for whispers of her downfall to spread. Her glamorous image, carefully curated over years, was unraveling just as fast as her life. I hadn't planned to fuel the fire, but I couldn't help it when an old college friend sent me a screenshot of one of Amanda's posts with the caption, "Michael, this aged like milk." I responded with a simple line, "Turns out lies do that." It wasn't long before that comment was circulating among our mutual friends, sparking a wave of curiosity. Someone inevitably pieced the story together. Between the failed apartment sale, the repossessed car, and Amanda's lover vanishing, the narrative was too juicy for her social circle to ignore. A former friend of hers, likely someone she'd burned along the way, posted a thinly veiled tweet. "When you trade loyalty for luxury and end up with neither, yikes." It went viral. Amanda's reputation wasn't just dented, it was obliterated. Her so-called friends, the ones who had hyped her up during her betrayal, turned on her with a viciousness I couldn't have predicted. Screenshots of her infamous Instagram divorce post started circulating again, this time accompanied by mocking captions. "Oops indeed," or "How's Florida, Amanda?" People love a scandal, and hers was tailor-made for ridicule. One day, while scrolling through the chaos, I stumbled upon a video someone had made summarizing the entire saga. It was a slideshow of Amanda's Instagram posts, paired with screenshots of legal documents and speculative captions about her downfall. The video ended with a simple question: where is she now? The comments were brutal. She probably moved to the middle of nowhere to hide. Bet her boy toy left her the second the money ran out. She thought she won, but she lost everything, lol. I'll admit, I felt a twinge of satisfaction watching it all unfold. Amanda had always cared more about appearances than substance, and now the very platform she used to flaunt her fake life was exposing her. Her social media empire, built on lies and vanity, was crumbling, and there wasn't a thing she could do to stop it. The funniest part? Amanda had always been the type to block anyone who criticized her online, but now the criticism was everywhere. Even people who had never met her were weighing in, dissecting her choices like armchair detectives. She'd gone from being an Instagram darling to a cautionary tale. Meanwhile, I quietly thrived in the background. My friends, the real ones, rallied around me, offering support and even a few laughs at Amanda's expense. My family, who had always been polite but distant around Amanda, started coming over more. I finally felt like myself again, free from the toxic shadow of someone who only ever cared about herself. Amanda's downfall wasn't just satisfying, it was justice. She'd spent years cultivating a lie, betraying the people who cared about her, and chasing a life that was never real. Now, the truth was out, and she couldn't outrun it. Social media can be ruthless, but in this case, it was merely the mirror reflecting the consequences of her actions. As for me, I didn't need to post anything or make a spectacle of her downfall. Watching it unfold from the sidelines, with my dignity intact and my life on the rise, was more than enough. She'd made her choices, and now the world was holding her accountable. It was poetic, really. Amanda had always been the star of her own drama, and now, she'd become the punchline. Months passed, and life began to settle into a quiet rhythm, something I hadn't experienced in years. The chaos Amanda brought to my life was gone, leaving me with space to rebuild. The apartment was mine again, the car was back in its rightful place, and my finances were secure. But the most valuable thing I regained was my peace of mind. Amanda, on the other hand, had vanished from the world she once ruled. Her social media accounts were deleted, her so-called friends had abandoned her, and the last whispers I'd heard were about her couch surfing with distant relatives. The Florida dream? A distant memory, much like the lover who left her high and dry when her money ran out. She had burned every bridge, and now she was facing the consequences alone. One afternoon, as I sat in my office reviewing plans for a new project, an email notification popped up on my screen. The subject line read, "From Amanda? Please read." I stared at it for a moment, debating whether to even open it. Curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked. The email was a rambling mix of apologies, excuses, and pleas. She admitted she'd been selfish, reckless, and cruel, though she tried to frame it as a moment of weakness rather than a pattern of behavior. She wrote about how she'd lost everything: her lover, her friends, her dignity, and begged me to give her a second chance. "I realize now what I threw away," she wrote. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me. Please, Michael, let's fix this." I leaned back in my chair, reading her words with a mix of amusement and pity. She didn't want me back because she loved me. She wanted me back because I was her safety net, her way out of the mess she'd created. Amanda wasn't looking for reconciliation. She was looking for rescue. I didn't reply. Instead, I closed the email and went about my day. A week later, I received another message, this time shorter and more desperate. "Michael, please, just talk to me. I'll do anything." Still, I said nothing. Sometimes, silence is the most powerful response. The final straw came when she showed up at my office unannounced. My receptionist buzzed me, her voice hesitant. "There's a woman here to see you. She says it's urgent. Her name's Amanda." I took a deep breath, then told her to send Amanda in. She walked into my office looking like a shadow of the woman I once knew. Gone was the confident, polished Amanda who always demanded attention. In her place was someone disheveled, defeated, and desperate. She sat down across from me, tears already welling up in her eyes. "Michael, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please, I'm begging you. I've lost everything." I listened as she poured out her regrets, her voice cracking under the weight of her own guilt. When she finally finished, I sat quietly for a moment before speaking. "Amanda, I don't hate you. In fact, I thank you. Because of you, I've learned what I truly value in life. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it certainly doesn't mean going back. I've moved on." Her face crumpled as she realized there was no saving what she destroyed. I stood, signaling that our conversation was over. "All the best, Amanda," I said, echoing the words I'd posted on her infamous Instagram announcement. With that, I walked out of the room, leaving her behind once and for all. That evening, I sat in my apartment, the one she tried to sell, and reflected on how far I'd come. Amanda's betrayal had been a storm, but I'd weathered it. I didn't just survive, I thrived. My business was booming, my friendships were stronger, and for the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. Sometimes, life has a way of teaching us the lessons we didn't know we needed. Amanda thought she'd taken everything from me, but in reality, she'd given me the greatest gift of all, freedom. And as I looked out over the city lights, I couldn't help but smile. I had my life back, and there was no turning back.